Okay, so in this week's guitar lesson, we're going to take a look at a Gypsy Jazz style lead. And actually, when I listened to the playback, it sounded a little more Western swing than I meant for it to, so it's got elements of both. But I'm calling it Gypsy Jazz because I was trying to sound like Django Reinhardt. This is sort of my attempt at trying to sound like that style. And it doesn't really matter what style we're talking about, though. What really matters is the thought process that goes behind how to improvise and play over chord changes like that. And we're going to take every note that I played, note for note, break it all down, connect it back to some chord shapes that you already know how to play. So hopefully you'll be able to take elements of this and start using it right away when you improvise. So I've got this lesson split into two parts. In this video, we're going to go through the first half. If you like to download the tablature, the MP3 jam track, which I have in multiple tempos, watch the part 2 video, get all those extras that come with this lesson. You can get those by going to activemelody.com, go to the weekly lessons page, and do a search for EP502. Okay, the first thing we need to talk about is, well, the key of the song. The song's in the key of G. And we're going to take this into little chunks. So the first section we're going to look at has 4 chords in it. I think this will be the easiest way to think about it. So those first 4 chords go like this. Just keep cycling through. So the first chord is our 1 chord, that's a G. Then we go to our B minor. I actually played a B minor 7, but it's a B minor chord, that's our 3 chord. Then it goes to the 2 chord, which is our A minor, and then the 5 chord, which is our D7. So it's a 1, 3, 2, 5, the first part. There's a little chromatic little step down there that I did going between the 3 chord and the 2 chord. Now, if you don't know what I mean by these numbers when I talk about chords, you can check out the Essential Theory course, which you'd have access to as a premium member. And then there's a unit in that course called the chord family. And I talk about what the numbers mean. They're basically just steps in the major scale. Those are the different steps. But anyway, there's a little more detail in that course. Okay, so what would you play if I was playing this? What would you play to improvise? You've never heard this before. How would you start having a conversation with me musically? Well, it's not as difficult as you might think. It's really just the major scale. We're going to be playing, since the first chord is a G chord and the key of the song is G, we're going to be playing the G major scale. And you could take any of those 7 notes of the G major scale and they're going to work over any of those chords. And I'll explain why as we start to break this down. So it probably makes sense that the G major scale would work perfectly over the G chord. But what about the 3 chord? When we go to the 3 chord, what would I play there? Well, you're still going to play the G major scale. You're just going to focus more on the 3rd interval of that scale. 1, 2, 3, because we're playing over the 3 chord. Are you making the connection? So what that means from a mode perspective, if we want to get real nerdy into theory, is we're playing in Phrygian mode. You don't have to worry about that. You just have to play the G major scale, but just focus more on that B note. That's still the G major scale. It doesn't sound like it, but if I start on the 3rd step of that scale, it sounds kind of minor and it fits perfectly over that 3 chord, the B minor chord. So what scale would I play then? When the song goes to the 2 chord, the A minor, you would still be playing the G major scale. Because look at this. I'm playing the G major scale, but I'm starting this time on the 2nd step because we're playing over the 2 chord. So starting with this note. And it sounds very minor, and it works. It's a Dorian mode. That's what we're playing over in that situation. So you can figure out, I guess, what happens here when we play over the 5 chord. For the 5 chord, same kind of thing. We're just going to focus now on the 5th step of the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to start here. And that's called Mixolydian mode, which is kind of it's just your major scale, but with a flatted 7. It's got kind of a bluesy vibe to it. But all of that is just the G major scale. That's the beauty of this. So when I'm playing all this lead stuff in this first part, that's all I'm doing is I'm just playing notes out of that G major scale. There's going to be a few exceptions I'll call out as we get to it, but that's the premise of the whole thing. Let's listen to the first part. All right, so what I played to start off with was So I landed on this note. That's our 7th interval of the G major scale. Listen, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Hear that note? Now, why would I land on that note? Well, the chord is going like this. There's a G major chord, but I wanted it to sound like a G major 7. And so by adding or landing on that 7 note, the 7th interval of the major scale, I colored the sound in that way, that kind of dreamy sound. You hear it in Western swing, you hear it in Gypsy jazz. And so depending on the note I land on, I'll get a different vibe. If I landed on the flat 7, I'd get a much bluesier sound versus... So that note that we land on is sort of helping emphasize the tone or shaping the tone that we're going for. Now these other notes would be just notes from the G major scale. So it's 4th fret, 3rd string. Then we're on the 2nd string and do 3rd fret, 5th fret. And I slid into that first note. Now I played it up here. I could have played it here. The only reason I didn't play it here was I wanted to be able to give it more vibrato. It's harder to do vibrato the closer you get to the nut. The tension gets too high. So it came up here. And then the next phrase goes... Now that note's not in the major scale, that last note there. But the rest of it is this. Just the major scale, G major scale. Now I'm going to I'll put the tab up on the screen here so that you can follow along that way. I'm not going to be able to go note for everything. Now, if you're a premium member, you will have access to the on-screen tab viewer, which has the tab and the video on the screen at the same time. And that will be very specific like that. And you can slow it down and loop the playback and all that. But for this, let's just get through the pieces and sort of why they're working. Why would I go to that note? Well, that note, I landed that time on that 3rd fret, 3rd string. And that note would be one of the notes from your G minor pentatonic. But the better way to think about that would be like your G diminished 7 chord. You have that note which leads you to the 3rd of the chord. Here, tension, release. And so even just with one note, you've created tension, sounds a little uneasy, but then I release it by going to the 3rd interval of the G chord. So that's the first phrase. We're going to repeat that phrase the second time. Let's listen. So it starts off exactly the same. Same little, it's like a call and response. There's a call again. Now the response is different this time. It goes. Let's talk through that. That is still just the G major scale. So you really need to learn your major scale in the different positions. Now I have a lesson on that. I'll put that up on the screen where I've got the G major scale in 5 positions and they line up with the 5 positions of the cage system. It makes it very easy to kind of group them in your head. Now this would be one of those positions, and I love it because it's very symmetrical. You've got 8, 7, 5, 8, 7, 5, and then you come down to the 3rd string and you have 7, 5, 4. Same thing on the 4th string, 7, 5, 4. So all of that is your G major scale, just in another position. So when I play this lick, that's where that's coming from. Now it goes like this. So it's basically going down the major scale, but then going back. You're creating like a little pattern here. The tab will be up on the screen. You can follow along that way. Now watch this. So when I did that, I played chromatically. And chromatically just means you play every note along the way. So instead of us skipping some of those intervals, we're not skipping anything. And you can do that. That's the other thing with this sort of gypsy jazz style, and same with Western swing, it sounds really good to occasionally work in some chromatic things where when you've got 2 notes that have a gap between them, have a fret between them, play that note in between. You don't always want to do it, but when you do it from time to time, it sounds really good. So that lick goes. Now that's a great alternate pick exercise. Just that one lick. You could take that one lick and just try and play it up to tempo. Now, I know a lot of you, this is going to be too fast. The way that I played it in the intro, that's done at 100 beats a minute. So I do have a version of the jam track that's at 70 beats a minute. So you can start off with that slower one, just kind of get the notes under your fingers, and then kind of work up towards that 100 beat a minute version. All right, so now let's look at the next grouping of chords. Now we're going to switch keys. The song actually changes keys. So everything we were doing in this first part was really around G, around that G chord. That was our 1 chord. We were playing our 1, 3, 2, 5, but it kept resolving to the 1. Now in this part of the song, it resolves to that C chord, which would be the 4 chord of the key of the song. But to get there, check this out. We have the 2, 5, 1 of the 4 chord, not of the key of the song. It's not the 2, 5, 1 of the key of G. It's the 2, 5, 1 of our C chord. So when you can start thinking about chords that way, it changes the way you think about everything, about playing rhythm and lead. And it took me a long time to get that concept. But the 2, the 5, so that's our D minor, a G7, and then our C, the 2 and the 5 are the 2 and the 5 of the C. So what do we play over that? Well, since the song has switched keys now for this one moment, we're going to play the C major scale. So when the chord is D minor, but I'm playing the C major scale, I'm playing in D Dorian. And when the chord is G7, and I'm playing the C major scale, I'm actually playing in G Mixolydian. That's what's going on theory-wise. You don't have to get caught up in that per se, but you just have to do this. This is kind of the key to the whole thing, is just becoming familiar with the major scale in those 5 positions all over the fretboard. When you can connect the major scale to the cage system, and again, I'll put that lesson up, even though I just did. I just want to kind of re-emphasize this one lesson because it has an exercise and practice and everything that you need to do that. When you can do that, it changes the way that you play because your fingers know where to go. Your brain kind of gets in the way sometimes, but your fingers remember those intervals. And so even without thinking about it, I could hear the key change in that song, and I knew I got another scale that I can start working in. My fingers know what to do. So it really does come down to learning that major scale all over the fretboard when you're wanting to play the chord changes like this. So 2, 5, 1. So the first thing that I played goes like this. What is that? Remember, the first chord was our D minor. See how that fits? I'm basically kind of highlighting that D minor chord. But the notes that I'm playing are the C major scale. Or they're D Dorian. It just depends on how you want to look at it. But they're the same notes in either case. So I'm holding down ring finger there on that 7th fret 3rd string. And then I come up to the 2nd string, 5th fret, slide up to the 6th fret, and I let that ring out. I thought that sounded kind of cool. Has a much sadder minor sound. Now after that, I come up to the 8th fret 2nd string and then slide up to the 10th fret 2nd string. And then watch this. It's much easier than you might think. We're going to go 8th fret 2nd string, and then we're going to come down in bar on the 5th fret and play 2 of each of those. So 2nd string, 3rd string, 4th string. What is that? That's my C triad, right? So I was just playing the notes out of that triad. So we have just highlighting the notes right out of that C chord. And I knew to do that because I knew that was the part in the song where there was the C chord. And I was already in position here, so why not just hit those? There's a lot of things I could have done there. I could have done the whole Gypsy Jazz thing where you go down a half step and come up to each of those notes. So that may be something you want to play around with. But anyway, I wanted to kind of point that out. Now, for those of you that are, let me just say this as a sidebar here. because I can already anticipate this from somebody. Somebody out there is going, okay, this major scale thing, like I'm a pentatonic scale player. Now you're doing major scale, and I don't know when to use which. The truth is, I could have played this entire lead using the major pentatonic scale, and that would have worked just as well. The only difference is I'm missing 2 of the notes. When you play the major pentatonic scale, penta means 5, so we've taken 2 of the notes out. And so you're limited in what you can say when you're trying to express yourself. It's a lot better for this style of music to use the full major scale. You have all 7 notes and you can be a lot more expressive. So anyway, just wanted to mention that. There's nothing wrong if you want to just use the pentatonic scale. You can do that. And that scale will work over these different modes just as well. So you could play that C major pentatonic scale over the D minor chord, the G7 chord, and the C, the 2-5-1. You could still play the C major pentatonic scale and get away with it. It's just not as colorful. All right, so now the song goes to another key. We go to the 2 chord of the key of the song, which should be an A minor, right? Because the song was in the key of G. But I went to an A major. You can take any of those minors that should be minor and you can make them major. Same is true with the major chords. You can make those minor if you want. You can experiment and you do that, and it's called like borrowing a chord or pulling a chord from a different key. So the song goes to that A7 chord, and then it goes back to the 5 chord, which is our D7, and then back to the 1 chord. So when we go to the A7, for that one little moment in time, we've switched keys again, and I played. Let's look at that. So I'm just really thinking about my A7 chord shape here, and I'm kind of playing the arpeggio of it. It's not anything really clever. It's just walking right up the arpeggio. And then here's a little chromatic note by adding that in-between step. So all of that represents the A. And then the song goes to that D, and I played. And I just walked it up. This is a Jerry Garcia thing. It's not really Django, this. It could be Django, I guess. Maybe Jerry got it off him. I don't know. But what we're doing is, I'm picturing this. I'm picturing my D chord here using the A shape, and I'm walking chromatically from the 5th fret up to the 7th fret on the 2nd string. And then I come down and hit this note, which is the 7th fret 3rd string. And I'm just picturing this, that D chord right there. And then a little embellishment, which I've talked about in previous lessons, but basically it's that D triad there. This is a little shape you can do off of that as an embellishment. Here's your sidebar. Check this out, little bonus lesson. You've got all of that which represents your D chord, or actually just represents that shape. Think about the shape of it. So if you were in any key, you could use that. I get a lot of mileage out of that. It works in blues, country, everything. So when I did that little lick, however I did it, the tab will be more specific about it. That's where it comes from, is from that shape. All right, so let's back up and take a look at the first half of this solo one more time. I realize it's a lot of information, but just think of it in small chunks. Don't get overwhelmed by it. And if you walk away with just 1 or 2 ideas, let that be the value. It's something that you can keep forever and apply to any style of music. So you don't have to just think of it in Gypsy Jazz or in Western Swing. It can apply to anything. All right, let's look at it one more time, and then I'll see you in part 2.